Black Friday has started on Boosty. Up to 60% discount on subscription levels. Hurry up to buy at such a great price. You can watch exclusive videos of Naruto Lemon. Link in the description. Enjoy watching, everyone. Description: what if Naruto can no longer bear the oppression of constant contempt from those around him and eventually breaks? And what if at that turning point he meets one of the legendary Sannin? And no, it's not Jiraiya. Chapter 1. And the light faded. Ha! Ha! Involuntary cries flew out of Naruto's mouth as he tried to throw the shurikens with a wide swing at the wooden board attached to the wall. Uzumaki gasped for air with bated breath, his blue eyes cautiously focused on the flying weapon. And another miss. The shurikens, as luck would have it, kept flying past their intended target, causing him to become furiously irritated and the entire class to burst into uncontrollable laughter. "What are you laughing at?" he snapped, turning to his classmates, after which they burst into even more laughter. "You're just a loser. It's already your 6th try, and you still can't hit the target. Ah ha ha! You will never become a ninja. Why do you even go to the academy? You are not teachable." Uzumaki felt heat enveloping him from the inside. His teeth clenched tightly from the heart-wrenching resentment. His lips pressed into a thin line, barely holding back the growing emotions so as not to cry, which would be so humiliating. But they are right. You are not teachable. The one who was least expected to speak through gritted teeth. Iruka-sensei, his eyes flashing with anger, looked at Uzumaki and headed towards the shurikens that had fallen on the grass as a sign that the attempts of the good-for-nothing bully, as he called him, were over. Naruto watched his actions, feeling depressingly annoyed and replaying the teacher's words in his head several times, the causticity of which made everything inside him go numb. Only after a few seconds did Naruto feel that his lungs were critically short of air, after which he took a sharp breath and returned back to the class. "So, now there will be a test to determine your physical abilities. In this test, you can only use taijutsu and cold weapons. No ninjutsu or genjutsu." Iruka-sensei asked a new topic. "Is everything clear?" "Hi!" The classmates responded positively. "Excellent. Let's begin." And the first fight, the teacher ran his eyes over the list of names. His hands clenched into fists. An unpleasant shudder ran through Naruto's body from the expectation that his name would be called now. Uzumaki absolutely did not want to participate in all these tests, and even be in this place. He looked from one classmate to another, and his face naturally wrinkled with hostility. Everyone, without exception, was prejudiced against him. They called him names. They humiliated him. They laughed at him. "Naruto, get out, you don't belong here. Naruto, you are such a fool. Naruto, all you do is irritate everyone. Naruto, he's so stupid. He thinks he can beat Sasuke. Sasuke." As soon as Uzumaki remembered him, Iruka-sensei's voice seemed to tear him out of his thoughts. First fight, Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki. The pupils of the blue eyes narrowed in surprise. The legs seemed to have grown to the ground, not wanting to bend and move their owner to the middle of the field. Naruto could not believe that he had just been named, and paired with the one he could not stand most of all in this crowd. After this announcement, a drawn-out squeal of girls was heard. Of what they were shouting at the Uchiha, only enthusiastic praises could be heard about how he was the best, and that he would definitely be able to smear Naruto on the ground. And the Uchiha himself outwardly did not pay attention to either the screams of the girls or Naruto himself. And because of the latter, Uzumaki came out of his detached state and experienced a long range of emotions, from renewed irritation to hatred. Separating from the class, both stood in the center of the stadium. Uchiha's phlegmatic gaze nevertheless acquired a shade of interest, and at the sight of this, Naruto's ardor sharpened. "Maybe you should give up right now," Sasuke said in all seriousness. His words already trampled Naruto into the dirt. "Surrender? Yes, I'll beat you." "Quiet, Naruto. You'll never defeat him," the pink-haired girl screamed, standing up for her crush. A pink-haired girl named Sakura. The girl that Naruto liked so much, but who hurt him so much every time she spoke to him. How hurtful it was to hear those words from her now. Ino also shouted in support of Haruno, "Yes! Better get lost before Sasuke beats the crap out of you." Irika, who had been watching the quarrel until then, let out a resigned sigh, but before he could blow his whistle, Naruto, finally provoked by the last phrase, immediately rushed forward at his opponent. The clanking of shurikens could be heard. Uzumaki was not going to let Sasuke defeat him with his eternal self-confidence. Arrogance. And arrogance. Take that. He shouted, jumping up and throwing several weapons at his opponent. But no matter how much he wanted to win, Sasuke was still more gifted than him. Faster. And stronger. The weapons all flew past the Uchiha, and he didn't even have to dodge much, because Naruto's lack of accuracy did everything for him. Sasuke, having done only a backflip, then picked up several shuriken from the ground on the way to attack Naruto and threw his own weapon at him, after which he was going to deliver a direct blow to the jaw. With the help of one remaining kunai, Naruto wanted to deflect the shurikens flying at him, but inexperience and banal incompetence did not allow him to do this, which is why he received numerous minor injuries. Due to the distraction of attention by the cold weapon, Naruto almost at the last second noticed Sasuke's fist and as a result was barely able to dodge it. "Hit him!" I heard made an exclamation on background. The Uchiha's instant turn and kick to the back at that very second doomed Naruto to defeat. "Ah!" A cry came out from Uzumaki after hitting the ground. One of Sasuke's hands immediately grabbed Naruto's wrists behind his back, and the other hand pinned his face to the ground. His crushed jaw began to ache from pain, and dust from the ground was mercilessly driven into his eyes. Sasuke, with indifferent eyes and a barely visible satisfied grin, watched as Uzumaki trembled and grunted in anger because of the outcome of such a short fight. No matter how hard you try, you will not become stronger or smarter. You will remain a fool, at whom everyone will laugh. Naruto's resistance weakened in an instant. These words pierced his soul with lightning speed, like ice arrows, with piercing coldness. A choking lump lodged in his throat, which he could not swallow. And in his gaze, bitterness entangled his body with invisible ropes. "Winner, Sasuke Uchiha," the teacher concluded. Another joyful squeal of the girls was heard, which finally finished off Naruto. He didn't have the strength to get up at all. Crushed by Sasuke's words, Naruto didn't even notice that he had already freed him from the embrace with the ground. His forehead felt heavy because of the tears that were trying to come out. But he couldn't let them show themselves. Not in front of them. Overcoming himself, Naruto stood up and disappeared behind the crowd of classmates. Silence. The birds chirped outside the window. The gentle rays of the sun gently showered the room with a golden light for the last time, until the sun finally set behind the horizon. For some reason, this calm atmosphere was not to the third's liking. He sat before the Hokage's face before his face with a deep sense of regret, never having fully come to terms with the events that had happened in his life. Some of which were the departure of his most gifted student and the death of the fourth Hokage. Sarutobi looked at this light hair, blue eyes, and his soul became so warm. Warmth, from which the heart was completely burned out. Hiruzen promised that he would take care of the boy and protect him from enemies. But the years took their toll, taking away the skills that had deteriorated in quality, and no one else was eager to keep his promise for the sake of the fourth and Naruto's well-being. What will become of him? Minato. Naruto walked along the busy evening street, freezing in the cold in a light t-shirt, step by step overcoming houses and shops. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed how everyone around him turned unkindly to look at him, and some even tried to push him so that he would disappear from their field of vision faster. Raising his head timidly, Uzumaki began to peer at the people passing by. Contempt. That was all that could be read on their faces. But why? Why this attitude? Naruto couldn't understand it at all. What was the reason? What caused this baseless hatred towards him, weighing so heavily on his heart? Lost in his tormenting thoughts, He didn't even notice the girl walking towards him, whom he subsequently knocked down. "Oh!" Seeing her on the ground, a worried voice of some man was heard. "Hinata!" He quickly approached her, and having made sure that everything was okay, turned the angry gaze of his empty eyes to Naruto. Before Uzumaki had time to apologize, the man immediately exclaimed, "Get out!" The suddenness of such a menacing voice made Naruto flinch in fear and move away. "But Dad, he didn't do anything to me!" Hyuga was heard to squeak. "Stay away from him," the man said through clenched teeth. And Naruto ran. Wandering down a narrow, dark alley, he ran without looking back. He wasn't running from Hinata and her father, no. He was running from the entire village. Having climbed up some carts with bags lying around to the roof of a rickety residential building, Naruto headed for the village gates, jumping from one roof to another. Approaching his goal, he stopped abruptly in front of the fence and froze. His heart was beating wildly, his breathing was interrupted. One more jump. And he did it. There was no one around. Naruto, with his reckless desire to run away from the leaf, did not even imagine how much he was risking himself. His legs were racing with incomprehensible speed, overcoming the branches of the trees, behind which, after a sufficient amount of time, the village was no longer visible. From the emotions he had experienced today, his strength was purposefully leaving his body. But he still did not stop walking. Time flew by quickly. From the lack of energy, his legs eventually gave way, and Naruto fell down from a not very great height like a stone. "Eh!" A dull thud was heard on the ground. "Ah!" he stammered in pain, depressed. Fatigue took over, not even allowing him to raise his eyelids, despite this jolt. The only thing he perceived in the surrounding darkness was someone else's steps, but he did not react to them. The young offspring of the fourth. Interesting. Chapter 2. In the snake's den. "Did you call me?" "Yes, come in." The Hokage pointed to the chair. Having closed the door barely audibly, Yumino obediently approached the table and sat down on the furniture opposite. His face was tired, his eyes were sleepy, his consciousness was drawn to the world of dreams. But, despite this, Iruka was full of interest, as he wanted to know what was the urgent reason for his being called to the residence at such a late hour. "I wanted to talk. Talk about Naruto." "About Naruto?" Yumino was surprised at the name of a not-so-pleasant person. "Yes. How are things going with him at the academy?" Hiruzen looked up from his papers with all his sternness. "Business?" "Business," Iruka said again, confused by the topic of conversation. "Things aren't going well for him." "Why?" Sarutobi frowned. "He's a hooligan. He doesn't listen, he's always arguing with his classmates." The explanation sounded like some kind of ridiculous justification, which is why the third asked again incredulously, "Does he quarrel with his classmates? Maybe his classmates quarrel with him?" Yumino lowered his gaze from this restructuring of the question, blinking several times. "Ah, well. I don't like the fact that you transfer your personal dislike for the boy into the curriculum and refuse to take him on as is." Iruka's eyes widened, the Hokage's tone and harshness knocked him out of his comfort zone, and what he heard caught him off guard, which is why he literally swallowed his tongue, not daring to say anything in response. His fingers began to nervously fiddle with each other from the third's dissatisfied insistence, because the third was not at all happy with the state of affairs, because Naruto, like no one else, in his opinion, had to become stronger. Stronger, to be able to control the fox for the sake of protecting himself and the village. And in the end, the son of one of the most talented shinobi Konoha couldn't teach even the most basic basics from the textbooks. There were not enough books for him, he is not supplied with material from here, no one pays attention to him in class, and when problems arise, no one tries to give him even the slightest hint. If this continues, I will have to suspend you. The eyes from the floor immediately stared at the Hokage. Iruka admitted that he understood everything perfectly. In the academy, Uzumaki was indeed deprived of due attention, and no one wanted to mess with him at all. Iruka understood perfectly well that most of the blame lay with him, because he was the one who mainly taught Naruto, but the memories of that ill-fated day, tearing him apart from the inside, still framed him in invisible frames, causing such excruciating pain, so Yumino could not yet overcome himself and accept the little Uzumaki as a person, and not as a vessel of the nine-tailed monster. "I'll talk to Naruto and find some extra time for him," Irika said, as if through force and reluctantly repenting. "I hope." The sound of the chair legs moving against the floor was heard. Yumino pushed away from the table, stood up from the furniture and headed for the exit. Sarutobi's eyes involuntarily closed from fatigue, accompanied by a powerless sigh. "I will fulfill my promise." Cold. Damp. The air was filled with the faint smell of chemical extracts. Naruto's body was crawling from the icy bed he had somehow found himself on. Beads of sweat were slowly trickling down his forehead, not helping at all from the tormenting heat. His head was aching, not allowing his thoughts to concentrate clearly enough to understand where he was. The heaviness that was overcoming his body did not allow him to move even his fingertips. But he did not want to move. Slightly opening his eyes, he saw some vague room around him, with vials, pills, and syringes lying around. Naruto was too weak to look around better, and so he closed his eyelids again. His eyebrows involuntarily drew together, his lips trembled, and it became difficult to breathe. "No matter how hard you try, you will not become stronger or smarter. You will remain a fool, at whom everyone will laugh." Naruto didn't have the willpower to restrain himself, and squeezing his eyes shut, single tears still rolled down his rosy cheeks. His chest began to rise more often. The condition was getting worse. Too much had accumulated inside a lot of sore things. He wanted to burst into tears even more, but Naruto was trying to control himself. He didn't want to show all these weaknesses anymore. But for now, he wasn't doing it very well. "He continues to feel unwell." A voice unfamiliar to Uzumaki was heard nearby. "The medicine will start working soon." Naruto felt someone approaching him with barely audible steps, and opening his eyes, he vaguely saw a man with long black hair. Several strands of hair disobediently covered some parts of his face, on which there was a hostile grin, and in his eyes one could read arrogance. Arrogance that had nothing in common with contempt. And for some reason, this slightest remark made Naruto feel a fervent internal uplift. The man looked down at him like a boa constrictor at a mouse, which at any moment could drive it into a circle to further entangle and squeeze the small body until it lost its life. But Naruto felt that the snake was not going to attack. "It's funny that the material itself came to me." His voice finally rang out, accompanied by a contented, quiet laugh. Naruto's eyes closed again from the sheer effort of keeping them open for a few more seconds. Who would have thought that he could escape from the village? It doesn't surprise me. Konoha can't even keep an eye on its own leader's safety. What are you going to do with him? Are you interested? The black-haired man asked intriguingly. The hours flew by at an incomprehensible speed. Before Irika could notice, blue colors began to appear in the sky outside the window instead of black. Such light, such gentle, such warm tones. Yumino, having arrived home last night, was unable to close his eyes and spent the entire time in his thoughts. He had absolutely no desire to go meet the boy, but circumstances forced him to do so. Hokage disobeyed as forbidden was. Sharply pulling the blanket off himself, he got out of bed and dressed with active movements, in order to quickly visit his student. Having adjusted his shinobi headband before leaving, Irika left the house and made his way to Naruto's house. And his house was not far away, literally a couple of steps from the place where he lived. The steps creaked unpleasantly underfoot. In the small courtyard in front of the front door there were some packages of fast food lying around, and on the railings there were clothes that Naruto had apparently tried to wash, and hung out to dry. A couple of knocks on the door silence. It was not early, Naruto should have woken up by now. Irika knocked again. "Naruto!" He said his name quietly. And in response, the same silence again. And for some reason Yumino didn't like it at all, which is why he decided to visit the student at home by force. Having knocked down the door with precision, Calculating his strength so as not to break it, Irika found himself in a small apartment. The picture around was as depressing as in the courtyard, clothes lying around with empty boxes from under food. Only in even greater quantities. Naruto, Yumino said again. But the house was empty. Is he training? Or where is he? Chapter 3. Meeting. Crack. Rumble. A thick smoke rose up around, filled with flying fragments. Someone's drawn-out howl could be heard. Naruto immediately lowered his head, seeing that his hands were completely drenched in blood. What is this? The echo of his own voice was heard faintly. He turned around and saw several giant snakes in the distance destroying a building, and somewhere from there he heard the shrill screams of people unknown to him, after which pieces of flesh flew into the air, splashing thick red liquid in all directions. But despite the sophistication of the picture, Naruto was not afraid. He was not afraid, and moreover, he wanted to see more. His heart suddenly overflowed with a light joy, as if it had been freed from viscous shackles. A strange thirst for freedom was growing inside. He wanted to grab hold of this fleeting impulse and squeeze all the juices out of it. All the blood. He wanted to get everything without a trace, give free rein to madness, and finally, swim headlong into this sweet euphoria. Behind the layer of smoke, someone's silhouette began to appear. It was a man. Hair down to his waist. Skin with a slightly bluish tint. He stood confidently and looked straight at the same picture as Naruto. Although his back was turned, for some reason Naruto knew that this man had a very pleased expression. What happened? Uzumaki abruptly sat up. The dream ended at the most interesting part, and the question remained unanswered. His heart began to pound, as after a long workout. His body ached. His head immediately began to spin from such a quick rise. His hands involuntarily squeezed the thin blanket until consciousness began to return. Naruto began to quickly glance around the room and subsequently saw a large number of medicines on the shelves and table nearby. Hospital was the first thing that came to mind. But despite the medicines placed around, it was hard to call this place a hospital. It was too quiet. Too calm. Too gloomy. This peaceful and lonely atmosphere lasted for a few more minutes, when Naruto lay back down to sober up completely. But he didn't want to lie down any longer, because interest had enslaved him. Stepping onto the ground, Uzumaki carefully moved forward, trying to get out of the strange ward as unnoticed as possible. Closing the treacherous creaking door behind him, Naruto began to wander silently along the long, dark, patterned corridors. The guess at his location, the hospital, stood under even greater doubt. With internal anxiety, slowly moving further, he reached the middle of the forked road with 4 branches around. Suddenly, the echo of someone's footsteps was heard. But it was very difficult to determine where exactly they came from. Naruto fearfully turned around and got lost among his own guesses. And the steps at that time were approaching closer and closer. Okay. The class is free. And just in time after these words the bell rang. The children happily began to pack their things in order to quickly leave the walls of the academy. Irika, leaning his fists on the table, nervously exhaled through his nose. His face was worried. 2 days had passed since he visited Naruto. The Jinchuriki was still missing. Where could he have gone? The thought that Naruto could leave the village was immediately eliminated, because how could he? A stupid, completely useless boy who does not know how to do absolutely anything. Has anyone seen Naruto? Irika asked the guys without much hope. No, they all answered at once. It's as if someone is talking to him, someone from the crowd said quietly. Yumino's gaze fell on the picture outside the window. He remembered the incident when Naruto had disappeared a few months ago. For a whole week. The Umbu guarding the borders of the village all said that Naruto could not have left the village. And that turned out to be true. All those days Naruto had simply been hiding in the alleys, and now the same thing was most likely happening, because the Umbu would have immediately spotted the fleeing Jinchuriki. There's nothing to worry about, Irika whispered in a reassuring tone. A stranger's hand fell loudly from behind onto Uzumaki's shoulder, which was tense with fear. Are you really willing to take it on just to— Yes, a terrifying smile spread across Sannin's face. I want to see pain and remorse on his face. But on the original target, the presence of the fox Jinchuriki will not be limited here? Yakushi asked, already knowing the answer in advance. Is that so? Guessed right. With its help it will also be easier for me to catch my new vessel. I will save time and my own strength. The snake involuntarily burst into laughter. You, as a spy, are also an integral part of my plan. So don't be upset. Kabuto. Who are you? Uzumaki said with a trembling voice. Naruto's blue eyes, in which life seemed to have died out, stared at the young man with round glasses, who was 3 heads taller than him. Yakushi looked down on him. Literally and figuratively. Kabuto still didn't know how to feel about Naruto. A plain and incapable child, but at the same time he was not so simple inside. Given the power of the Nine Tails and the complete lack of skills of the Jinchuriki himself, was it worth showing loyalty to him? Follow me, he called for them to follow him in a confident tone. Orochimaru-sama is waiting for you. Orochimaru, herself? Uzumaki repeated casually. Don't ask unnecessary questions. You won't get the answers from me. Naruto stood in a stupor, and the stranger, not intending to call him again, silently began to walk deeper into the corridor. Naruto did not have the courage to be indignant at where he was, or how he got here. All he could do was obediently follow the guy in glasses, because there was nowhere else to go. The floor ahead ended in steps, and the bars on both sides caught his eye. Going down, Naruto saw a long chain of cells in which exhausted-looking people of different ages were imprisoned. The prisoners turned their colorless gaze to Uzumaki and tried to say something, and this made Naruto's blood run cold. What is this place? Without taking his eyes off the people, he asked in a trembling voice. Who are these people? Experimental rats. Kabuto did not skimp on expressions. He knew very well that his answer had been deeply imprinted in the boy's mind, and this fact amused Yakushi quite a bit. Naruto held back from asking further questions, for he had no desire to enter into conversation, even though interest was tormenting his soul. Soon they both reached the farthest room in the corridor. Its door was slightly open. Suddenly, Naruto, without knowing why, fear and anxiety were replaced by excitement, and the fear of meeting a certain Orochimaru, by anticipation. Why did his feelings change so strangely? In the center of the dark room, a bright yellow light was pouring out on the table, near which stood a man, stirring something in an oblong flask. Fragments of today's dream flashed through Uzumaki's memory. A tall man, bluish skin, waist-length hair. All these similarities between the dream and reality made Naruto raise his eyebrows in surprise. I brought him. Kabuto made himself known, although he was aware that Orochimaru had noticed them both without his words. Chapter 4. Another Way of the Ninja. Naruto, the Sannin said slowly and contentedly, turning around. Uzumaki's throat suddenly began to ache disgustingly, and an icy chill ran down his spine. The snake's eyes were paralyzing, along with the musty stench of blood coming from it. Naruto could not open his mouth or utter a sound. His will was locked. The Sannin saw all his fear, confusion, and fear for his own life. He saw it and was satisfied. But he did not plan to scare the Jinchuriki to death, which is why he finally broke the silence. I found you unconscious in the forest. Naruto remembered how he fell from a tree branch when he was running away from the village, and with that he came out of his detached state. Where is? He barely spoke, nodding timidly towards the room. In my lair. They immediately understood the meaning of his question. We're not that far from Konoha, so you won't have to walk long to get back. Orochimaru leaned his pelvis on the table and folded his hands in front of his chest. Go back? Naruto looked down at the floor for a moment. Return to where his name alone made people feel baseless anger, where they were driven away as soon as he appeared nearby. Where the attitude of all the inhabitants pushed them into darkness without a single chance to get out. No. Naruto was determined to break his ties with this place once and for all. His eyes rose again to his interlocutor, and for greater authenticity Uzumaki asked, "Are you Orochimaru?" "Yes. One of the legendary Sannin Trinity. And this is Kabuto, my best student and spy." The voice sounded clear and confident, his facial expressions were moderately mobile, he masterfully tried to gain trust. "We know your name." "What?" Naruto was genuinely surprised, and the fear immediately slipped away, replaced by amazement. "Where from? Why are you surprised?" We don't know each other," Uzumaki said awkwardly. Kabuto, who was standing next to him, smirked slightly. Naruto was too pure. Pure, like the innocent child he was, and all of his emotions and reactions were very easy to predict. "We don't know each other." "But not knowing the son of the fourth Hokage?" Orochimaru feigned surprise, raising his fingers from his shoulders. The information he heard squeezed Naruto's head painfully. His vision went dark in an instant. A sharp, cutting sound stuck in his ears for several seconds. "Not knowing the son of the fourth Hokage?" Orochimaru continued, "Don't you know whose child you are?" Naruto began to audibly breathe in and out through his nose, his eyebrows arching downwards in disbelief. His voice hoarse, he replied, "And no." "Who told you that? Why would anyone tell this if it's obvious without further ado that you're an exact copy of your father?" Uzumaki, stepping back a little, turned his gaze to Kabuto, seeking confirmation from him of Orochimaru's words. The entire conversation went as Sannin had planned, because it was supposed to eventually lead to Naruto asking him for help and strength. Minato's names Namikaze and Kushina. "Uzumaki don't tell you anything?" The ash-haired man joined the conversation. "Fourth," Naruto mumbled. "Ha! I don't believe you. And who are you?" "It's your business whether to believe it or not," the Sannin said, as if cutting it off. "It seems Konoha decided to hide this from you. And do you know that the nine-tailed demon fox is sealed inside you?" A sharp gust of wind hit the curtains, causing them to flutter noisily. A wave of icy air rushed into the stuffy room of the house, where, sitting over the academy documents, the third decided to casually familiarize himself with the student's achievements. The text just eluded his attention, and Hiruzen could not concentrate on it, which is why he often leaned back in his chair in order to take a break. Hiruzen thought for a second about which of the current Jonin would be best suited to the role of mentor in the future team, where Naruto would be enrolled. Although it was still early, there was plenty of time before the exams, and the characteristics of the other two teammates would have to be taken into account. But still, while in thought, the night outside the window slowly began to dissolve. Morning came. The weather remained cool. The sun's rays barely filtered through the thick clouds. The leaves quietly rustled against each other under the pressure of a weak wind. The atmosphere was gray and brought on mixed feelings between cheerfulness and melancholy. The children walked lazily and discontentedly to school. Iruka watched them through the window, sitting at his desk, and with a barely creeping anxiety in his chest, he thought about Naruto. Among the numerous faces of the students approaching the doors of the academy, he did not see his face for the umpteenth time. Was it worth sounding the alarm? After all, it had been 4 days. Naruto had not come to class for 4 days. Previously, Iruka had not particularly followed the Jinchuriki's attendance schedule, because he preferred not to see him at all. And maybe Uzumaki had disappeared much longer than he had been gone now. But right now, Yumino was very worried about his absence, because he had to urgently discuss the topic of extracurricular activities with him. Iruka stood up from his chair and walked over to the window, clutching his wrist behind his back until it went numb. It had started to drizzle outside, distorting the view through the glass, and Yumino began to take a closer look at the children while it was still possible. Suddenly, an orange vest over a bright blue t-shirt caught his eye. It was impossible to tell if it was a boy or a girl. Several kids were blocking his view. Iruka literally stared at that t-shirt. A moment, and a familiar face with 3 scars on its cheeks appeared before him. "Naruto!" escaped my lips. He couldn't believe it. Was he mistaken? Or was it really Naruto? Why was he so surprised, as if the boy had appeared to him? Yes, it wasn't even surprising, but Iruka couldn't quite understand the reason for his reaction, because it was difficult to determine his emotions. This incomprehension a little confused. He walked quickly towards the office door to go out and make sure. Hello? Yumino had only just managed to open the door and take a step forward when he had to suddenly turn back, greet everyone and let them in, with the appearance of almost an entire class on the threshold. Iruka gave each of the children a piercing look, which slightly alarmed them. His gaze became more and more nervous with each student who passed by. Yes, where is? He became angry, and then exhaled tiredly from the overly tense surveillance, and closed his eyes for a split second. Hello? The small blonde boy said loudly, awkwardly scratching the back of his head, which made Yumino flinch slightly and quickly open her eyelids back. Are you okay, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked in surprise. Yes. Yes. You, where have you been? Yumino collected his thoughts, changing his tone as he spoke, making it more confident. 4 whole days, he added, placing his hands on his hips in a sign of indignation. I was sick. The boy spread his arms out to the sides, looking away to the upper corner of the room, as if he was not telling the whole story. Were you sick? Iruka narrowed his eyes in disbelief. Yes, I was sick. I ate a lot of ramen at once and I felt sick. The bell rang, as if to save the boy. But Iruka stopped him when he tried to follow him to his desk. Stop. Don't scold me, Databao, Uzumaki said pitifully, apparently expecting a verdict. And I didn't plan to. Iruka snapped, and immediately came to his senses. Ahem. I want you. I want you to start going to my extracurricular activities. It's mandatory and refusal will not be accepted, he said in one breath. Good. Naruto blurted out, either happily or not so happily, and went deeper into the classroom. Iruka watched him go and began to be perplexed by the student's behavior, which he considered strange. At this time, the rain poured down without ceasing and became stronger. But in the place next to the waterfall it was hardly noticeable. The splashes were even a joy to Uzumaki. They washed the feelings that had been boiling up from within. He sat in the lotus position, squeezing his hands in a certain seal for meditation and restoration, which helped to maintain balance between the two energies of the body. The use of a special, untested technique created by Orochimaru, and pills that accelerate the flow of chakra output in return for the creation of a clone, exhausted the body. Moreover, this was the first technique, and also a serious technique, which he successfully managed to master. He gave a small part of his life energy to create not just a clone, but his own double, who would temporarily have to replace his place in the academy, and in general fill his absence in the village. This technique can be very dangerous for a normal shinobi, but with the high endurance inherited from the Uzumaki clan and an impressive amount of chakra, you will not be in danger of a fatal outcome. Know that the technique will not let you worry about the possibility of pursuit from Konoha while you are here. Kabuto's words came to mind. The double was probably already there. After these couple of days, the brain no longer tolerated the decline of mental activity. The resentment towards Naruto's home was replaced by mutual contempt. Disgust, which grew deeper and deeper with its roots. The man who seemed to be an authority became an object of hatred. He chose the protection of the village over your well-being. Loving parents would never put their child's life in danger. They were more concerned about the safety of the village than how its inhabitants would treat their son. Naruto had repeated Orochimaru's words in his mind more than once. Uzumaki did not dare complain about his current impotence, because the Sannin had become a kind of opener for him. The sharp edges of the news had smoothed out a little, but that did not mean that they had disappeared completely. They would never disappear. And so Naruto now had a clear goal: to gain power and use it to destroy the Hidden Leaf Village. Chapter 5. Wandering. I can't. I don't want to go back there, Naruto said tersely after coming to terms with the fact that there was a demon inside him. Some time passed, and the rain eased a little. It was worth briefly distracting myself from my thoughts and trying to come to my senses completely, as the pain, which had just been weakly cured, slowly began to disturb the pain again, slowly creeping up. You have nowhere to go except Konoha. True, I could help you. Uzumaki's eyes slightly closed, the corners of his lips curled down slightly. A burning annoyance flickered on his face from the fact that the village had shamelessly hidden such a thing from him. Everything inside was crumbling into small pieces. The raindrops turned into hundreds of needles, piercing the skin, forcing the muscles to tense, thereby intensifying the dull mental pain. Will you take me as your student? Naruto asked hopefully. Only because you have the boundless power of the fox sealed within you, I will allow you to stay here. But in exchange, you will serve me and help me in my plans. I see you are actively recovering? Naruto, shuddering, sharply turned his body towards the voice of Orochimaru, who suddenly appeared behind him. The Sannin stood at a distance, not at all averse to getting wet under the drops of rain and the waterfall. For 2 days, Naruto saw him intermittently due to the fact that he lay almost all this time in a room separated for him in dreams in order to drive away the fever and headache, and therefore Orochimaru's presence still made him freeze under the impression of his power, which was still invisible to the eyes. Ah, yeah, Naruto said fearfully. Kabuto is collecting the medicine you need. As soon as he arrives, we will head to another shelter. Why should we go to another shelter? Uzumaki continued to stutter. For safety's sake, we change shelters every week. The snake informed evenly. Naruto really wanted to ask why the Sannin had left the village and what plans he had in mind that time, because those questions hadn't occurred to him the first time they met. And in principle, that conversation had almost immediately become a blur in his mind, and Uzumaki remembered it only in fragments. Naruto desperately tried to put his thoughts together and let the words come out, but his tongue, clinging tightly to his teeth, didn't want to help his master. Orochimaru saw the dead expression on Naruto's face and removed the shackles of his own gaze from him. And as soon as he did this, Uzumaki dared to say, "What plans?" The phrase sounded as if it had been taken out of context. The Sannin looked at the Jinchuriki again, considering the various ways in which this question could have arisen. And quite quickly, Orochimaru remembered their first conversation. "I'm going to raise Konohagakure to the ground," he almost hissed with a slight veil of irritation. The terrifyingly languid barrier suddenly crumbled to his feet. What he heard seemed to throw Naruto out of the depths of the earth to the endless expanses of the sky. It was incredible how the answer to his question blew away all the confused thoughts and cleared his mind, that Naruto was now ready to follow this man to the ends of the earth. Anywhere, if only Orochimaru would really give him the strength so that he could destroy this place he hated with all his heart together with him. Uzumaki was ready to jump to his feet and enthusiastically asked to start training, despite the fact that his energies were not completely returned to their previous state. Orochimaru couldn't help but notice the change in the boy's expression, as it noticeably became more animated. Ah! What is the Sannin Trinity? Uzumaki decided to ask another question of interest, using the well-established contact. Orochimaru smirked. It doesn't matter at all. Yes. Naruto also felt that it was completely unimportant right now. He suddenly felt a sense of emptiness in his chest, which forced him to return to the process of self-recovery. Orochimaru, mentally satisfied with another good find and smoothly going business, continued to stand next to the boy, watching intently as he diligently concentrated on meditation. Soon the air nearby was torn apart by a Shenshin. The ash-haired youth in glasses immediately attracted the attention of the Sannin and Naruto. In his hands was a medium-sized gray backpack and a few shades darker, light, far from new in appearance, Haori with a brown belt. Here. Kabuto handed Naruto's things with indifferent calm. You'll put on an umbu mask so no one will recognize you. Having risen, Uzumaki obediently pulled on the given mask, Haori and backpack with medicines, and Orochimaru and Kabuto at that moment transformed into 2 wandering tourists. We can go, said the snake Sannin, turning towards the large pedestrian road. The village of Shadows is a small, not very populous village between the Grass Village and the Land of Fire. It is said that the Nara clan originated here, Whether it is rich or poor is a moot point. The people are dressed decently, but their faces are not at all cheerful, darkened by something, as if they had recently declared a general mourning. The gloomy sky and slow rain made this place even more depressing. The construction of the buildings seemed of average quality, done, and not carelessly, and not rolled up. Naruto smoothly looked from right to left and from left to right at every corner of the buildings. Not only was it hard to breathe through the umbu mask, it was also uncomfortable to look through. Uzumaki kept adjusting it endlessly, and sometimes lifting it slightly so that a wave of fresh air could reach him. Naruto's stomach suddenly began to rumble, so loudly and protractedly that he immediately began to feel like vomiting. He consoled himself that the hungry roar of his stomach was not heard by outsiders because of the roar of the crowd around him, although it felt like this sound reached the entire area. "It's worth having lunch," Kabuto said unexpectedly and in time. "Yes," Naruto involuntarily agreed, clinging to this phrase like a life preserver. Orochimaru didn't say a word. After walking some distance, he came across a familiar eatery with a not very attractive sign, which showed its name and a picture of sushi. This place was also an inn, headed by Akikazu Kono as one of Orochimaru's spies. "There," Sannin nodded towards the eatery. The location was ideal. After all, the fewer eyes, the better. After the door opened, the sound of bells was heard. None of the customers paid attention to the guests who had arrived, because everyone was busy with their own meal. But Akikazu, standing behind the bar and rubbing a faceted glass with a rag, immediately looked with a suspicious gaze at the three strangers, one of whom was also from Umbu, walking towards the table by the window in the corner. Usually, when Kono saw new people in his tavern, he shouted at them in a bold tone to find out their names, but this time something stopped him from doing so. Leaving the glass alone, he took the menu from the counter and hurried to approach the unfamiliar company. The overweight middle-aged man with stubble and dirty black hair walking along was immediately noticed by Orochimaru and Kabuto. "Hello, dear ones. Where have you come from?" Akikazu said with feigned friendliness. From under the voluminous straw hat he recognized the crooked grin of a snake. Sannin took off his headdress and, squinting slightly, looked at his compliant subordinate. "Hello to you too, Akikazu-san. Long time no see." There was a distinct hint of mockery in his voice. Despite the disguise and the feminine voice that gave off a hint of madness, No immediately realized who was in front of him, which caused a crushing wave of horror to overcome him. It seemed to him as if his body began to melt from the piercing gaze of the Sannin. "Oh! Orochimaru-sama," Akikazu swallowed. Naruto, without being distracted for a second, watched the scene before his eyes. "We'll wait out the night here," Orochimaru said in a calm tone. Yes, of course," No said loudly. "Stay as long as you want. And the food is on the house." "Then bring it," Orochimaru said as if it were self-evident. His voice seemed very calm compared to Akikazu's nervous voice. The latter, without delaying the arrival of food on the guest's table for a minute, quickly walked to the kitchen to bring out the signature dishes. "Who is this?" Naruto asked. "One of my subordinates." A smile stretched across the snake's masked female face. Uzumaki, seeing the owner's reaction to Orochimaru, no longer doubted at all that the Sannin was unimaginably strong, because it was not for nothing that just his gaze enveloped the body in paralysis. Kabuto also took off his straw hat. He did not change his appearance, because there was no need for it. Turning in the direction where the owner went, Naruto was almost poked in the eyes with a plate. "Here's sushi onigiri, freshly squeezed juice, and signature ramen," Akikazu quickly listed. "Ramen!" flashed through Naruto's head with delight. Uzumaki began to look at his favorite broth with wide eyes without embarrassment. Fortunately, the mask hid his indecently enthusiastic look. The only tasty ramen he ate was from Ichiraku. He reluctantly, but still allowed Naruto to come to his restaurant, as the old man called it, and ordered this soup. Naruto really hoped that the broth in front of his nose would not taste disgusting, because he was simply incredibly hungry. Bon appetit! If anything, I'm over there. Kono pointed to the bar counter with a smile from ear to ear and immediately retreated. Naruto happily removed the mask from his face and grabbed his chopsticks. Orochimaru and Kabuto stared for a few seconds as Naruto quickly and greedily emptied the bowl of food, and then began to eat themselves. Uzumaki drank all the juice from the glass just as quickly, and he had to admit to himself that the food was pretty good. But he wasn't satisfied with just ramen, and so his hand reached for the delicious-looking onigiri. No one forbade him, no one stopped him, and this seemed strange to Naruto. But nevertheless, Uzumaki continued to gorge himself on the delicious things. Why? Are we staying here? He asked between chewing his food. You'll get weaker on the way. It would be better for us to wait it out, Sannin replied. But... Orochimaru and Kabuto looked up at Naruto. Kabuto pushed to continue the thought. I already feel good. Uzumaki blinked. And I can even start training. Out of the question. Training is contraindicated for you now. Orochimaru cut off this nonsense quite sternly. But why? Uzumaki was offended and indignant. It only seems to you that the condition has returned to normal. The technique of creating a double takes away part of the vital energy. And the taken vital energy seriously upsets the balance between physical and spiritual energies. Everything could not return to normal in 2 days. It is impossible, stated Sannin. But at least something. Throwing shurikens, Naruto fell silent as he spoke. In your current state, you won't last long, Kabuto added sharply. What was said offended. Offended so deeply that Naruto wanted to shout something contradictory right then and there. He had enough of being a constant ignoramus. Enough of being a crying burden. Enough of being a snotty brat. Enough. I want to train, Uzumaki said as firmly and confidently as ever, clenching his fists on the table. And it didn't sound like a spoiled child's capricious protest. The words were full of seriousness and didn't want to receive a negative answer. This character trait pleased Orochimaru, the desire to gain experience and knowledge, despite the fact that it was not yet within his power. Resting his chin on the knuckles of his right hand, and with a thoughtful expression on his face with the shadow of an uneven smile, tracing the edge of the plate with the finger of his other hand, Orochimaru said, Try. What? Uzumaki and Kabuto were surprised at the same time. The latter glanced furtively at the Sannin. He did not understand why the master needed to undermine the health of the Jinchuriki. What did he want to extract, and what did he hope for? After all, there was a high risk of a fatal outcome. Or, Kabuto was wrong? In the backyard of the inn there was a small ravine leading to a sparse forest. The rain had long since stopped, and small golden stripes of sunlight were breaking through the thick clouds to the ground. About 2 hours had passed since lunch, and it was getting dark outside. The pleasant smell of ozone filled his lungs, giving Uzumaki a boost of energy. All this free time after lunch, near several cut trees and an abandoned bridge in the middle of nature, Naruto meditated and waited for the arrival of the new sensei. The snake did not keep him waiting long. His silhouette was already outlined in the distance. He had a scroll in his hands, and Uzumaki stared at this scroll with his gaze almost immediately when he saw the Sannin walking towards him. He stood up from his place, as if in a sign of respect, and unexpectedly for himself took a step towards him. So as not to overload you, for the rest of today you will learn to throw shurikens and walk on trees. Walk on trees? Naruto blinked in surprise. Yes, you heard right. Is this possible? Orochimaru frowned slightly. Apparently, Konoha is an even more wretched place than I thought. How can he not know this? The Sannin demonstratively walked to the nearest tree and casually walked up to its crown. Naruto's jaw nearly dropped to his feet at the sight of it. How? Orochimaru let out a strangled laugh in his usual manner, and then abruptly landed back next to his young student. To rise in the same way, you need to concentrate chakra in your feet, the Sannin explained. Cool. But why is this necessary at all? Although this skill is very easy, it is quite practical, and therefore it will not hurt you at all. Having learned to control chakra in individual parts of the body, you will be able to master techniques of varying complexity without any problems, including throwing weapons without missing. Orochimaru twirled the scroll with his fingers, opened it, and used his seal to summon the weapon. 5 kunai and 5 shurikens are enough for you for now. Master them. I'll leave you. Are you leaving? Naruto was confused. If you want to achieve something, achieve it yourself. I told you everything you needed to know. Get started and come back with the result. The male figure disappeared behind the lush foliage as he spoke, leaving the small Jinchuriki in the middle of the virgin forest. Chapter 6. New Technology. The evening smoothly turned into night. The sky, clearing its expanses, slowly erased the gray clouds. The air was getting fresher, cooling the skin and persistently not giving a reason to fall asleep. Weapons were stuck in several scratched trees. Footsteps knocking on the trunk were heard, and this was the only thing that disturbed the surrounding silence. Naruto, throwing his hands back, ran up, trying to stay in a perpendicular position as long as possible and reach at least the first branch. The result after the first hour of solo training was achieved. If Naruto had previously fallen after the first step on the trunk, then after the time had elapsed, he began to rise one step higher each time, but at the same time, at the end of each time, control over chakra slipped away, and Uzumaki fell down, because of which numerous wounds began to appear on his hands, knees and face. In between, Naruto meditated, which allowed him to better hold the flow of chakra, and closer to night he no longer fell, but pushed off the trunk, doing a backflip when he felt that his concentration was slipping again. His legs could barely hold on, his hands periodically felt either heaviness or lightness, his head was spinning for a short time after running through the trees. He was catastrophically thirsty. But Naruto, out of stubbornness, did not want to return to the tavern exactly until he conquered the first branch, and the trees, as luck would have it, or maybe even joyfully, were very high. Things with throwing weapons progressed with about the same result. Holding the flow of chakra in his hands, Naruto was already able to throw shurikens and kunai sharper and closer to the target. Naruto was confident that with a little more practice he would hit the bull's eye. Uzumaki felt that he needed to meditate again. It would help him to make up for the lost strength a little, but fate wanted to help him in a different way. Uzumaki, staggering, tried to go to a comfortable place, but suddenly fell to the ground, falling into sleep. Into a very deep and sound sleep. What zeal! Kabuto chuckled to himself, watching the Jinchurikis training from the tree the whole time. Yakushi was truly surprised. A brat without an ounce of talent could hold out for so long, despite being mostly exhausted inside. Impressive. Going down, he approached the sleeping Naruto. Kabuto's eyes, slightly narrowed, stopped for a few seconds on the blonde. Kabuto himself did not understand why he suddenly froze, and shaking his head slightly, picked Naruto up on his shoulder and headed to the tavern. The cool room was filled with the hubbub of people and the chirping of birds. Squinting briefly from the glare of the sun, his blue eyes suddenly flew open. Naruto growled and immediately turned away from the light. Despite the fact that he should have been deprived of the freedom to move and feel pain in his muscles, Uzumaki felt, on the contrary, more alive than all the living. Raising himself up, he saw that he was lying on a futon in a small, bright room, with no furniture except for a nightstand, and opposite were two similar beddings. Standing up from his seat, Naruto walked over to the window and, pushing aside the light curtains, which were stained in places, he saw a brightly lit road in front of him and people walking along it. A new day, he said out loud on an exhale for some reason. The rays of the sun falling directly into his eyes caused noticeable discomfort, which made it difficult to see, and because of this, interest in what was happening outside the windows soon disappeared. Suddenly, someone was heard entering the room from behind. His heart skipped a beat, and Uzumaki instantly turned towards the sound. But seeing that it was only Kabuto, he calmed down. Let's go. It's time for us to hit the road. Naruto walked to his futon without a word and began to gather his things from the floor. It was unpleasant to throw the haori over the dirty t-shirt from the night before, although it itself was not particularly new. As soon as Uzumaki was about to put on the Umbu mask, Kabuto stopped him. Take your medicine. Yes. Naruto had completely forgotten about it. Opening his backpack, he expected to get some syrup or pills, but he was very wrong. They were edible, tree branch-like herbs, and they tasted pretty good. Don't forget about them, otherwise you'll get serious complications. Kabuto continued discontentedly and opened the door to the room. When the two left the inn, they immediately saw Orochimaru at the door of the inn. He was in the same condition as yesterday. Noticing his subordinates, he pushed off the wall and walked forward along the road. How are you feeling? Me? Naruto asked again. Ah, good. Okay? Orochimaru looked, turning in profile and curling his lips into a grin. Are you sure? Yes. I feel great. Uzumaki answered with optimism and firmness, to which the Sannin stopped and quietly said, Wonderful. Naruto's wrist was suddenly grabbed by the snake's rough hand and was immediately dragged to the roof of one of the buildings nearby. Ah! From there to the roof of another building, and from the roof of another building to a tree. Orochimaru released Naruto's limb and allowed him to move on his own. Uzumaki was taken aback by the speed and unexpectedness of the actions, and even when he was released, he did not have time to come to his senses, as he had to quickly move forward in order to catch up with the sensei and Kabuto, who were moving away along the tree branches. Hey, wait! He shouted and ran after them. The path to the shelter was held without a single stop, which greatly pleased Uzumaki, because now was not the time to rest. Naruto was filled with lightness and pushed off from the branches as if from springs. He did not keep track of time and did not know exactly what time it was. Was it noon? Or maybe it was already the second hour of the day. The three shinobi managed to pass the village of shadows and reach the bridge of heaven and earth at the same fast pace, and from there they made their way to the shelter itself. One lair was completely indistinguishable from another. The same darkness. The same dampness. The same patterned corridors, lit only by burning candles on both sides. The sound of footsteps echoed along them and then was lost in the depths of the room. One of the narrow corridors led them to a balcony, from where they could see a large round hall below, into the walls of which some kind of voluminous pipes entered, and in the room itself from the ceiling to the floor there were several columns. This is a training ground. I will teach you a new technique here, said the Sannin, and then returned to his former male appearance. Based on Naruto's training, Kabuto informed Orochimaru that the Jinchuriki could begin to learn entire techniques, because his powers were returning incredibly quickly. And it was simply amazing. The fox's power was truly astounding. And of course, Orochimaru, in his usual ordinariness, underestimated it at first. Wow, Naruto said quietly. What's this new technique? Summoning technique. Orochimaru turned to face him with crazy eyes. As summoning? Uzumaki became nervous. But I haven't fully learned how to walk on trees yet. There isn't much time left before the exams for you to master all the necessary techniques. So you'll have to hone your old skills while learning new ones. Will it work out, all at once? Suddenly, Naruto felt the fear of disappointing his sensei. Is there too much to expect from him? Will Naruto live up to everyone's expectations? Or will Orochimaru become just another person who laughs at his ridiculousness and inability to learn? Since I'm saying it, it will work. I'm not throwing words to the wind. Naruto's thoughts, watered with doubts, changed in an instant. Again. How did he do it? Uzumaki couldn't understand it. The Sannin, as if by a wave of a magic wand, changed Naruto's train of thought and mood. Follow me. Orochimaru-sensei headed down the stairs. Naruto, with a fluttering heart, obediently followed him to the middle of the court. Now listen. Summoning jutsu requires a lot of chakra. Your usual chakra won't be enough here, so you'll have to use the fox's power. The power of the fox? Naruto stepped back a little from these words. Have you ever felt two chakras inside you? As if he had missed Uzumaki's violent reaction, Sannin. Naruto looked up, remembering. 2 chakras. Yeah. Something like that. One blue and one red, and it's so powerful. This is the power of the fox. Wow. But how am I supposed to use it if I don't know how to control it? And I've never met the fox. I don't think he'll be happy if I borrow his power. Most likely, the tailed beast chakra appears when you are in danger. After all, if you die, the demon inside you will die too. If you create a dangerous situation for you, the bijou will be forced to protect you. A dangerous situation? Naruto repeated after his sensei, unhappily. What if I use up my regular chakra so that the Ninetales voluntarily has to give me some of its own? He does have some sense. It's simple. A quiet chuckle came from Orochimaru. Simple? Not at all. He raised his thumb to his mouth and bit it until it bled. A call. He slammed his palm down on the ground and then straightened up, standing on the giant white reptile's head. Awesome! Naruto clenched his fists in front of his chest in admiration. I want that too! The summoned reptile silently opened its mouth wide and pulled out a long tongue that reached the floor, in which a scroll was entangled. The manuscript in front of Uzumaki immediately opened, and he saw vertical columns with the names of the users of this technique. This is a contract with snakes. Write your name in blood and leave a palm print at the bottom. And when you want to call the summoner, create the required amount of chakra and lower the hand with which you signed the contract to the ground. The sequence of hand seals is as follows: pig, dog, bird, monkey, and sheep. The Sannin demonstrated on himself for clarity. Naruto literally scanned the combination and tried to repeat it himself several times. It was impossible to remember everything at once, and also to fold the fingers in the correct position the first time. Only after the fourth attempt, Uzumaki was able, albeit slowly and uncertainly, to fold his fingers as needed. Then Naruto did what was said about the signature according to Orochimaru's sensei's instructions. He carefully listened to what he wrote in the scroll, so as not to make a mistake in the hieroglyphs of his own name. All. Excellent. Now we need to wear you out. How? The white snake swallowed the manuscript back and disappeared, and the Sannin landed right in front of Naruto's nose. It must always be remembered that Orochimaru is a man of decisive and radical action. He will achieve results by any means necessary, sparing no effort from his subordinates, and not being afraid to lead them to death. Naruto had this firmly in mind as he fought off and dodged the attacks of the 5 prisoners that the Sannin had released from the dungeons so that they could help Naruto properly lose his strength. Uzumaki ran along the walls and threw kunai at them, trying to at least temporarily immobilize these thugs. But they did not calm down, despite the fact that they themselves were exhausted due to such a long confinement in the lair. Come here, brat! Naruto didn't even turn around to look at who shouted. How can we defeat them by simply running? His body was getting more and more hot, the hair on his forehead was sticking together from the sweat that was dripping down, his eyebrows were furrowed, holding the upper part of his face in tension. The room seemed unbearably stuffy, and his t-shirt was constantly fluttering from running, causing his body to feel an unpleasant chill. Naruto squeezed out his will to the last drop and held on. He held on until he reached his designated goal. The prisoners who were released were the ones who did not know how to use the elements, but they were very fast and Naruto barely managed to avoid each of their blows. At one point, Uzumaki felt that his hands were starting to be stabbed, and then completely burned. Distracted by the strange pain, he slowed down in his run, and thus doomed himself to a blow from one of his opponents. Naruto flew several meters, turning over 10 times on the floor. Blood gushed near his temples and upper lip. Gritting his teeth, Uzumaki raised himself on his hands and sat on his knees. The burning, like a flash, suddenly intensified, which caused Naruto to roar loudly in pain. Orochimaru and Kabuto on the balcony did not take their eyes off him, watching with genuine interest what was happening to him. Blue eyes fixed their gaze on the palms, which began to be enveloped in a rich scarlet, seething cover. As if blood had come out of the flesh. And only when Uzumaki raised his head, he noticed the swirling waves of scarlet chakra around him, which did not allow the 5 guys to approach him. And Naruto understood. This is my chance! A shaking hand touched his face, and the fingertips were covered with red liquid. Uzumaki tried to form seals more sharply, but his hands seemed to turn to stone, slowing down the process of summoning. Come on, he groaned quietly. One more symbol and… done. Call! Thick white smoke broke through the red waves, quickly dissipating after a few seconds, after which those present were presented with a huge, dark purple snake that reached all the way to the ceiling. Maanda! Orochimaru said the name of his favorite animal under his breath with satisfaction. Unbelievable! He succeeded. Yakushi was surprised, adjusting his glasses. He needs a long rest after that. His tissues may be torn, and there may be a risk of a malfunction in his body. Yes, you're right. Send these 5 back. Naruto, with wide eyes, looked at the dark scaly surface that he was resting his knees on. It worked! The phrase formed in my mind with great difficulty. Manda, furious that Orochimaru would allow a mere child to summon him, began to rant and rave at the Sannin, his voice so loud that the walls began to shake and the earth above began to fall down. And Naruto heard all this in the background. He was going to sleep. His eyes rolled back, and Uzumaki fell down, powerless and unconscious. The light of the training grounds suddenly turned to darkness. A smell of even more dampness than the Sannin's hideout hit his nose. Naruto heard someone whispering in his ear, urging him to go somewhere. I want to see you! A strange, hoarse voice cut into my ears, incredibly piercing. The eyelids immediately flew open, and Naruto saw a corridor with lamps giving off a dim yellow light. What the… Come here, Naruto! The unfamiliar voice rang out again. Naruto shuddered, afraid to guess who it could be, what kind of place this was, and how he ended up here, but he involuntarily dared to take a step forward. Come on! Don't be afraid. I'll give you my power. Fox? Uzumaki, with a ton of doubts in his soul, he barely moved forward. He was furiously afraid of meeting the demon face to face, but he understood that he could not avoid it. He had a feeling that he was imprisoned in his own subconscious, and he would not be able to get out of here until he talked to the Nine-Tailed. Suddenly, a bright golden light began to illuminate the floor in the distance over the gloomy yellow. Naruto stopped for a moment, and then quickly moved closer to the source of this light. The room was filled with the sound of the beast's breathing. Naruto was already experiencing the onslaught of the tailed beast's dark aura. His heart sank. The meeting took place. Finally, the beast grinned terrifyingly at the sight of his Jinchuriki. You've come to me. And why you were waiting? Uzumaki's voice trembled slightly, amazed at the tailed beast's size. Of course. I know, and you need it. Come closer. Closer? Why closer? Just come up. Naruto stood there warily, his eyes glassy as he stared into the vertical black stripes of the Nine-Tails' eyes. Come here so that I can share my power with you. How? Remove the seals. Uzumaki's gaze focused on the bars. Come on. Remove the seals, boy. No. Uzumaki suddenly stated confidently. What did you say? Be grateful that you live inside me. You should pay rent. Yes, how dare you? The demon became embittered in amazement from that phrase. He couldn't believe that some insignificant brat could say something like that. And so unexpectedly. What kind of sudden display of courage was this? But at one point it even made the fox laugh. What's funny? Hey! But I have no choice. Does this mean you agree? Agree to give me your power if needed? The tailed one exhaled loudly and mockingly. Consider this my gift, baby.